everyone, I'm Mike Monte. I'm the Director of Security Field Engineering at Anvilogic. And today I'm going to show you how you can boost your MITRE coverage 70%. Now before doing so, I do want to talk a little bit about problems in the SOC. And any security analyst that has been in the SOC understands these problems. Detection engineering is mostly manual. You have to do threat research. You don't have normalized fields. You don't necessarily understand where all of your data is. Could be in multiple indexes, could be in different data repositories. That makes things hard. It takes time. Typically building a detection from start to scratch, you're using multiple tools. You're doing threat research in one, you're tracking your ticket in another, you're using your data repo to actually run the query, and then you're documenting your triage steps. That's a lot of time, and typically that is a huge struggle. Detection maintenance as well. You typically deploy a detection, you don't typically know whether that it's going to cause a lot of false positives, right? And being able to tune that takes time as well. And also tracking this from a KPI perspective. How many false positives are you actually generating? How many are security events? What's the fidelity of that use case? It takes time as well. And then also the logging problem. Typically everything is centralized in a silo, right? Everything is going to Splunk. It takes time to get that data onboarded. Typically environments are hybrid. There's cloud environments with data. You're bringing that on-prem typically, or vice versa. That can be problematic and also kind of expensive. So what we do at Anvilogic is we automate the process of detection engineering, right? We provide an armory service. There's about 1,000 use cases readily available. But we also provide AI to basically tell you which detections you can actually leverage, so you are guided, right? Typically detection engineers have a huge backlog, and typically that takes time to go through, and they don't necessarily have the best direction. Tracking MITRE is a problem, right? And also automating the process of tuning, right? Typically detection engineers probably have one or two analysts solely responsible for tuning detections. That takes a lot of time. And then tracking that with MITRE, right, dynamically. Typically people do this, they may do it in a spreadsheet, they may have a tool to do it, but it's not dynamic, right? When you deploy something, that's another MITRE tactic and technique that you actually have to track. Who's responsible for doing that, right? That's a problem. And we also allow you to keep your data where it sits, right? So if you have a cloud environment, say for example, Azure, keep your data in Azure activity logs in Azure itself. Why bring it back on-prem? There's obviously cost savings associated to that as well. So just a basic example of where we sit, right? You bring your own data. We also ingest your security alerts as well. And then on top of that, you are able to automate tuning and health insights and deploy sequence-based detections, right? We do understand that every detection may not be perfect. You may be allow listing a lot in order to make that detection right. But rather than just alert on a particular signal, what if X then Y actually happens? Malicious document execution followed by command and control is a common example of that. So how it works, we're going to be really talking about number 3 as I go through the demonstration, but first you define your MITRE attack priorities, right? What is important to you as an organization? What are the threat groups that are targeting your particular industry? And what are the platforms that you actually care about? Do you have containers in your environment? Do you have Azure? These are things that matter, right? In order to prioritize what's important to you from a MITRE perspective. Secondary to that, pick your data platform, right? What data do you have and where does it sit? Is everything going to the same place? Likely not. So being able to hook into multiple repositories and still unify a single pane of glass from a triage perspective is very important. And then after we go through deploying AI recommended detection use cases, which we'll focus on today in order to boost our MITRE coverage 70%, you have the ability to automatically tune these detections, escalate high fidelity alerts, and last but not least, build your own detections and hunting queries with AI as an assistant. So I'm going to jump into a demo. And in this demo, I'm going to kind of show you how we recommend content to you based upon the data feeds that you have, the ability to bulk deploy content from our armory in order to boost your MITRE coverage very easily, and basically simplify the fact that you're covered. You can go tell your CISO, hey, I have coverage for each individual prioritized technique, and I did this way faster than the typical time it takes to build a detection. So right here, I'm on the home page, and I just moved to maturity score to understand my data feeds. Looks like I have Azure logs, web application firewall logs, Windows event logs, and Linux. Based upon my prioritized techniques, I only have one technique, right, covered. Looks like valid accounts. So a lot to do here, right? A lot to build a detection framework, and a lot of detections you need to deploy in order to be covered. So with our armory, we also provide recommendations based upon the data feeds that you have. We assess the feed quality. We ensure you have the right visibility, and we also provide guidance to say, here's what you're missing from a visibility standpoint. Data is always key for detection engineering. That's the primary starting point. Now I'm looking at detection packs. We automate bulk deployment of use cases. In this use case, I have 33 detections. I'm deploying now 33 detections to my Splunk environment, my Snowflake environment, my Azure environment, and based upon that, I now have a bulk deploy of rules. And what I'm showing you here is the normalization that we do as well, right? So in our detection framework, we actually normalize your data, and we also assess where your data is, right? You're not going to have Windows event logs in the same index, let's be honest. So being able to gather all of that data is really important and key to ensuring that your detection is across your entire landscape. Now I just bulk deployed some rules, and essentially that increased my MITRE coverage to 9%, right? I'm now going to go back to my recommendations from a detection pack perspective, and I'm still going to assess what is the best bang for my buck, right? And we provide that analysis for you to tell you what's the coverage that I gain. You can also filter by data category. Looks like I have Azure packs, but I'm going to move back that, and I'm going to actually go back to Windows event logs or Linux. This process can be very fast, right? Think about the time it takes to deploy 33 detections normally. You're creating correlation searches. It's very manual. That requires a lot of effort from a human. Unless you're using APIs in order to create multiple saved searches at the same time, that can be problematic. Now, what I'm showing you here is how we recommend use cases, right? Everything has a score. We basically assess, based upon the priority of your techniques, is it critical to your organization? We're going to give you a high score between 1 through 100. And essentially, you can go in and deploy individual detections if you want. But in this case, right, I'm showcasing 70% deployment of MITRE techniques. So in a continuation of this process, in order to deploy content, obviously to get to 70%, you have to deploy a lot of rules that cover different tactics and techniques. So I'm continuing this process to review my recommendations based upon the platform understanding your data feeds you have and what's important to you as an organization based upon your prioritized MITRE tactics and techniques. Again, that's derived from threat groups that are targeting your industry and the visibility that you have within your environment. As I continue to deploy these use cases, you're going to notice that these macros also, we won't let you deploy use cases unless you have the underlying components, right? So, there's guardrails in place to ensure that your detections actually are working as well, in addition to health monitoring to ensure your use cases jobs aren't being skipped, your data feeds that your use cases are running on don't necessarily drop. You want to be notified for all of that because, again, data is the most important thing for your detections to be successful. As you can see, I'm bulk deploying content. I've reached 30%. I have a much more coverage. And in that MITRE sort of view, I have the capability to filter down on what threat groups. So, for example, APT29 is very important to a lot of people based upon what's going on in the world. I can actually tell my CISO what's my coverage for APT29 based upon my MITRE tactic and technique. Typically that takes a long time. The CISO comes down, they want to find out some information about a threat group, and it takes time for you to figure that out without having this dynamically tracking your KPIs. Now what I'm just showing you is deploying an individual detection, right, for Windows network sniffing. We also look to load balance your detections across the hour so that your search head, for example, is not reaching capacity, or jobs aren't being skipped. We want to make sure that that's not happening. Obviously, you need your detections to run in a cordially fashion. Continuing on the deployment process, making sure that we get up to 70%, obviously. But I'm going to skip forward a little bit. After deploying those content packs, it looks like I have 264 rules that I automatically deployed. Right, I went from nothing. I went from one detection to 264 within a matter of minutes. Right now, you may be asking, well, how do I know that they're high fidelity use cases? The way that we approach that is we actually consider them warning signals. Right, we gather that information, those behaviors, in a glorified hunting index, mapped with MITRE, tagged with threat groups, and based upon that, we build correlation searches. Step 1, step 2. So I talked a little bit about malicious document execution followed by command and control. Now you have the ability to do that very easily. And last but not least, we track everything again from a history perspective, right? So as your analysts are actually doing things, you're getting the credit for it, right? I think a lot of times people build use cases, they don't necessarily know what the ownership is. There's no actually validation for an analyst to say, great job. It's just another search that's running. So, in summary, 264 use cases in a matter of 15 minutes, right? That's powerful. That enables you to, build coverage very fast across your prioritized MITRE techniques. And that is very important for, various reasons, for obvious reasons. But, yeah, thank you for the time. I hope you found this interesting. Feel free to stop by and get a demo of the product to understand what other capabilities we provide as well. Thank you.